What's up, you guys? It's Sasha here. Today we're going to talk about the different ways in which you can maximize the chances of you getting a credit limit, exactly how you go about getting one, and things you need to know about getting the best credit limit increases possible. Now, what are credit limit increases? Let's answer the basic question to start with. When you have a credit card, you get assigned an initial credit limit when you first apply. Depending on the credit card that you apply for, this can be anything from £250 and some of the highest risk, near prime, new to credit, bad credit, credit builder credit cards, things like Aqua, Vanquish, Capital One Classic, those types of thing, through to credit limits at the other end of the spectrum that can be as high as 15,000, 20,000, in some rare cases as high as 25,000 on credit cards that people like Barclaycard do. Now, what happens after that is credit card companies then look at what you do with your credit card, and after some time can make a decision to say, hey, this particular person could do with a higher credit limit because their behavior says that they need it, that it is good for them, it is acceptable to us, and they can afford it, so why don't we give it to them? So what can you do for them to make that decision? Now, a few things to know just before we dive into it. Number one is, not all credit cards give as many credit card limit increases as others. So if you're starting at the lower end of the spectrum, so you're starting on one of the really low 250, 300, 400 pound credit limits to start off with, the likelihood is that you're going to get credit limit increases, if you do all the right things, every 4 months or thereabouts for at least the first 2 years, because the initial credit limit is so low, because they're trying to test what you're going to do once you get the credit card. If you start out with a £15,000 credit limit, you're probably never going to get a credit limit increase, except for very specific circumstances that we're going to get to. But if you do, you're probably going to get one or two, and they're probably going to be quite big, and they are likely to happen in 2 years' time, not anytime soon. So just bear that in mind when we're talking about this. So first of all, when you're using your card, utilization is the number one parameter that credit card companies use to determine if they should give you a credit limit increase or if they should not. Utilization is the proportion of your credit limit that you use as balance. Now, there are two types of utilization. There is revolving utilization and transactor utilization. Typically speaking, if you're revolving a balance, so you're carrying a balance and it pays interest or is on a promotional rate, you're much more likely to get a credit limit increase if you have one of them than if you're transacting every month and repaying it in full. That isn't quite true for the lower limits. So if your credit limit is something like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, in that territory, you may well get a credit limit increase if you pay in full every single month, just because the credit card company is looking at you and saying, hey, Sasha is spending £2,000 a month on all of his different families, bills and everyday expenses, and repays it in full, and his credit limit is £2,500 a month. So why don't we give him a higher credit limit and see if he chooses then to actually borrow money instead of us not making any money from him? Now, for the higher limits, you're probably unlikely, except for very specific circumstances, you're probably quite unlikely to be transacting if your credit limit is £20,000 and have a high utilization rate. But what you don't want to have is a utilization rate that is too high, because what that means to the credit card company is that you might be in some form of trouble, you might be really tight for money and have nowhere else to go. So typically speaking, you don't really want your utilization to be above about 85% of your credit limit, and definitely not above 90%. Quite often when credit card companies decide who to give credit limit increases to, they will just exclude you if your balance is right up against your credit limit. You also don't want to have it too low, so typically if your credit limit is high and you're only using 20% or less of your credit limit, the likelihood is there is no good reason for the credit card company to take on the extra risk of giving you a higher credit limit, because you're not actually using the one they've already given you. The only exception to that is sometimes if you're completely inactive on your credit card and you have a relatively low credit limit, by relatively low I mean like under £4,000, the credit card company may choose to give you a credit limit increase to see if a higher credit limit makes you more likely to use a card. That's not so common. The most common way that you're going to get it is if your credit limit utilization is somewhere in the sort of like 50-60% mark. I'm not advocating that you should go and spend money and carry a balance in your credit card just to get a credit limit increase. But if you already have a promotional rate, or if you're spending and having to borrow because of your financial plan anyway, that is where you're most likely to actually receive one. Now, a few caveats, a few little things that you must do in order to not fall foul of some of the rules that they use when deciding who to give credit limit increases to. Number one, don't withdraw cash on your credit card. Generally, cash withdrawals are a bad idea, and they are a very high risk indicator to credit card companies. And quite often, if you have any cash withdrawals recently or carry a cash balance, you will be excluded from credit limit increase programs. And try not to apply for credit. So when a company decides to give you a credit limit increase, they will go and check the bureau data that they receive every month. And if they see that you've been applying for credit elsewhere, they might consider you to be a higher risk customer because you're obviously more desperate for cash at that particular point in time, and they may choose not to give you a credit limit increase based on that. The other thing you need to do is to make sure you subscribe, make sure you hit the like button and hit the bell to get notifications for the YouTube algorithm. After you've done that, make sure you just manage your overall credit profile the right way. So what I mean by that is getting a credit limit increase is very similar to applying for a credit card, except for you not choosing to do it, your credit card company does it for you. So make sure that all your payments are on time, make sure that you're not overutilized on all your other credit cards, you don't have too much debt, you're making all your payments on time and don't go over the credit limits that you have with the other credit card providers. Just keep everything in check. The last thing to make sure is, and this is a slightly different point, affordability has become a very big thing in recent years due to new regulations that credit card companies have to abide by. And what that means is they have to assess whether they think you can afford the repayments if they were to give you a higher credit limit than what you already have. And in order to do so, they will go and check all your other debts and make a guesstimate of how much you're having to pay as a minimum towards those debts. So if you have loans, they may assume higher amounts that you have to pay towards them per month. So if you have several different loans, credit cards, other forms of borrowing, you may not get a credit limit increase because they will look at all of that stuff and decide you will not be able to afford the repayments on a higher credit limit. So just make sure you don't have too much debt elsewhere if you're wanting to get a credit limit increase. Now, how do you actually go about getting the increase? There's a few different ways. The most common way are automatic credit limit increases. So what that is the credit card company will run a process. Some of them do them every few months in a batch. Some of them run a monthly process. Others run them on a daily basis, just checking which customers are eligible today for, according to a complicated algorithm which decides who should get a credit limit increase. Typically in the kind of previous era, before recent changes at the FCA, what happened is they would send you a letter and they would tell you that your credit limit increase is going to increase, and they would give you 30 or 60 days notice. If you didn't want the increase, you could opt out, although very, very few people choose to opt out of a credit limit increase. And then that credit limit increase gets applied to your account. Then you can go spend the extra money. More recently, some credit card providers have changed it so that in your online account, you can actually select an option which says that you are happy for credit limit increase to be applied to your account immediately. If you haven't seen it, or if you've had your credit card for a while, go and check. The likelihood is it'll be there somewhere. And if you tick it, the moment that decision gets made, you can go and get your credit limit increase right away. Now, the one caveat here is if somebody sends you one of these letters, emails, SMSs, whatever it is that they're going to do, you usually can find a number at the bottom, which if you ring, they will give you the credit limit increase right away and you won't have to wait. So if you're needing the money quicker than the 30 days or whatever notice that they're giving you, just give them a ring, or on some of them you can do it on the app or online. The other ways to get a credit limit increase is you can request it online via a form through your website, or via sending them a secure message. In most cases, the likelihood of you getting a credit limit increase that way are much less than through the automated process, because the criteria will be more stringent, simply because you are requesting an increase rather than deciding to give it to you. So the level of risk is different. You can call and request it. The likelihood is that it will go through exactly the same decision process as if you do it online. So you're not going to benefit by calling them over just doing it online if there is a form that you can fill in. The last thing that you should think about, if you're looking to do a balance transfer and you have a credit card that you would like to transfer the balance to, but the credit limit is just not quite high enough for you to be able to do that credit limit increase, one thing you might want to do is to call them up and don't ask for a credit limit increase, but ask to do a balance transfer. And at that point, tell them that you want to transfer more than whatever amount that you have available on your credit card. Quite often, credit card companies have some rules which say that if you have not enough capacity to do a balance transfer, they can give you a credit limit increase, and the rules for that might be different to the standard credit limit increase requests. And quite often, it'd be easier for you to get it if you're looking to transfer a balance in. So if that's what you're trying to do, make sure you go through the balance transfer route and then see if they'll give you a credit limit increase to go with it instead. I hope you find that really useful. If you have, leave a comment below. Tell me what you thought. If you have any questions, also leave a comment, and I will do my best to answer every question that you have. Again, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell. I will be releasing videos at least twice a week over the next few weeks. Hopefully see you soon.